Hi there, it's Kevin with RogueDeckBuilder.com here with an updated video for the Walking Ballista Rite of Passage Hardened Scales combo deck. This is my latest version of the deck. Had a lot of success with it. I'm not on my insane win percentage that I had before, but the win percentage is still quite good. Lost a few games like Eldrazi, Tron, and still does have a bit of an issue versus some of the more unfair decks. This deck is so good versus the fair decks, though. What I mean by unfair and fair decks is the unfair decks are usually combo-based decks that don't interact. They try to do something that isn't within the scope of what Magic was designed to do. So like Ad Nauseam, Eggs, Storm, all those try to win differently than what we'd say that the Magic was, the base way of attacking with creatures, killing creatures, casting spells to kill, creating a board state. But against decks that do interact and do care about board states and whatnot, this deck does incredibly well because of cards like Hangerback Walker and Walking Ballista being so powerful in Modern at the moment. Especially when you have cards like Gavin Township and Hardened Scales to even make something as innocuous as a bird. A Birds of Paradise can become quite the threat in the deck. So this is my latest brew with the deck. I have a very good win percentage against Eggs now. A couple of the matchups versus Eggs I was able to turn for them before they could go off. And also had Infinite Combo. I'm going to post out a video today. If you follow me on Facebook or on Twitter, I've already tweeted out or Facebooked out the Infinite Life versus Infinite Damage scenario that happened in a game versus Eggs with the Sword of the Meek, Thopter Foundry, Crack Clan Ironworks combo, and I had the Walking Ballista Rite of Passage Hardened Scales combo. So it was basically, I think that if I would have done it right, I just had it F6 for whatever reason, or I had his Crack Clans or Sword of the Meek or something, one of them I had that was automatically generating or yielding, and so I could have actually responded, I guess. I guess I had the win in that scenario with Infinite Life versus Infinite Damage, as I could stack my Walking Ballista into Infinite, and while his life was on the stack, I could kill him. But anyway, I'll put out the video for that because it's quite funny. So this deck, I added blue. The main changes for this deck, you can see the Archangel Thune and the Trinket Mage, and you see a Basilisk Color there. So Basilisk Color, Trinket Mage, Archangel Thune, and Spike Feeder. This adds 2 more infinite combos to the deck and doesn't really hurt kind of the fluidity, is that a word, of the deck, as we still have the Spike Feeder is really good with Hardened Scales, for example, and Basilisk Collar is extremely good with Walking Ballista. So one of the infinite combos is Archangel Thune, Walking Ballista, and Basilisk Collar. That will go infinite. Another one is Archangel Thune and Spike Feeder. That alone will go infinite. And if you even have a Walking Ballista with that combo, that's infinite damage. And then we have the traditional Rite of Passage, a Hardened Scales effect, and a Walking Ballista that are infinite. The Archangel Thune makes a great Court of Calling target when it's really, really late. I've got this already off with a Hangerback Walker that died on 4, put out 4 tokens, and was able to tap a few other things to Court of Calling into Archangel Thune. At that point, Archangel Thune is incredibly powerful, as if you can then get the Spike Feeder off another Court of Calling, or just if it attacks in, it puts counters on all of your creatures, and with Hardened Scales, it becomes huge. So that was one of the scenarios, able to attack an Archangel Thune, and then all of my Hangerback Walker tokens were just massive. I think I was actually able to block with my opponent just didn't, for whatever reason, attacked in, and then I chump blocked with Archangel Thune. The Archangel Thune did die to whatever I was chump blocking, but my Hangerback Walker tokens got huge and was able to swing back on the backswing for lethal. I believe it's Bogles I was playing with that. I'm not quite sure what the deck was, though. So anyway, I like the Trinket Mage in this particular deck because it adds a huge oomph to the deck. The Trinket Mage, if many of you may know, can actually tutor up the Hangerback Walker and Walking Ballista. I had 4 of at one point, but I think 2 is the right number. It's a great target for Court of Calling, because now Court of Calling can go get a Walking Ballista or Hangerback Walker by getting a Trinket Mage that then goes and gets one of them. And again, it can also, Trinket Mage gets the Basilisk Collar, which when you pair this up with Walking Ballista is an insanely good card, especially with the Gavin Township, which I now have a 4 of in the deck. So I think I maybe want to add another Noble Hierarch just to really utilize this Gavin Township. There have been plenty of matchups now that I've just won with a Gavin Township, a Birds, and a Whiny Constrictor because of how quickly those can get out of hand. Gavin Township also allows for like these awesome turn 4 kills with the Birds of Paradise, and so on turn 4 you drop a Gavin Township, you have the mana for the Gavin Township, and you have like even just like a Winding Constrictor in one other card, and it just does insane amount of damage through. I think one of the scenarios is I had 2 Walking Ballistas out and a Winding Constrictor, and that allows for both the ballistas to get 2 more counters, which actually translates into 4 damage because those 2 counters do 2 more extra damage, as well as can be removed. And there are plenty of scenarios where I was able to just on turn 4 and a tapped out opponent, just out of nowhere, just take off the victory. So also works very well with Hangerback Walker, getting counters on them. And if they're like a Fatal Push or a Lightning Bolt based deck, then a lot of times they have to kill the Hangerback Walker, not Path to Exile it, and you get just so much value after that. So Rishgar still seems to be a really good card in the deck. Rite of Passage cut down to a 2 of, because you don't want to see multiples. If you happen just to draw the infinite combo, then great. If not, you don't want to rely on it too much. I still admit this is probably the worst card in the deck. Nissa is surprisingly good with Birds of Paradise and Noble Hierarch. On a turn 2 Nissa, there are a few decks that it does so good at chump blocking Tarmogoyfs, shuts Liliana down. It's a huge amount of just life gain is what I'd like to say, because they start attacking into Nissa, trying to ticket or try to kill it. And you have the chump blocking plant token. It creates messy scenarios for your opponent. So I still like the 3 of Nissas. This could be a cut to 2 of, but it's one of those scenarios too with Walking Ballista and a Hardened Scales type effect that the -2 acts as like a Gavin Township. Sometimes you can actually do that twice in a game, and your Walking Ballistas are huge at that point. They're usually like 6/6s, and then attacking and then removing the counters is very, very lethal. You cannot, if it's like aggro versus aggro, this deck will be the one that snowballs out of control. I was able to outpace Bogles. Let me say that again. Outpace Bogles with a well-timed Abrupt Decay from the sideboard, taking out his, I believe it was the Daybreak Coronet, and it could not gain enough life or whatever he's trying to do, and with how fast I could generate tokens on the Walking Ballistas, and was able to overtake the game quite easily. Sideboard, though, the Trinket Mage gets a lot cooler. That's why there's one more in the sideboard. I don't have particular cards in my sideboard at the moment because just they're expensive. But the 2 other cards that I really think that are great to tutor up with Trinket Mage, or 3 other, would be the Cage, the Grafdigger's Cage. We do have a Relic and a Needle you can in the sideboard right here. But the Grafdigger's Cage is one. Chalice of the Void is insanely good against decks with either 0-cost cards or 1-cost cards, because we don't use 1-cost cards that often. We have the Birds of Paradise, the Basilisk Collar, the Hardened Scales, and whatnot, but a lot of times we'll actually have those cards out. I really like the Chalice versus Eggs, for example. A lot of the Eggs cards are 1 mana, and at that point you can really shut down them from really chaining off. But even decks like Storm, I'm sure there's a lot of decks that have, I mean, Chalice is a very heavily played card and can definitely shut down what your opponent's trying to do without hurting us as much. The Trinket Mage can also, there are cards what are some other cards I thought about getting? Animation Module. Animation Module seems pretty good as a target just for the grindy type matchups. The Animation Module is the one where whenever you get a +1 counter, you can pay 1 to get a 1/1 servo. Even thought about getting like even a Darksteel Citadel as a target, but that's pretty meh in my opinion. And there's tons of 1-drops. Even Aether Vial doesn't seem too terrible in a deck like this. Probably not, though. Probably not the right card. But Trinket Mage just has some pretty nice targets to go grab, and the real cool thing about it is it's always live. What I mean by that, there's always a target to get, even if you don't need to get the kind of toolbox control-based cards. You can get the Hangerback Walker, the Walking Ballista. What's the Spell Bomb? That exiles a graveyard and draws a card. That's a decent little card. Even the card out of Kaladesh, or Aether Revolt, excuse me, the put a counter on a creature, draw a card, would not be a terrible card to even put in with Trinket Mage. So that's my latest. I think blue is easily able to be generated with Birds of Paradise and Noble Hierarch, and fetch lands are so easy for a Howled Fountain or a Breeding Pool. It's quite easy. The mana base in this is going to get better when I replace the Wooded Foothills with relevant fetch lands here. So I'll have probably the black-green fetch land or the green-blue fetch land that can go get most of these targets and can really help fix. Scavenging Ooze is still good in the sideboard. There's a lot of decks that it shuts down. Still running like Fatal Pushes, Abrupt Decays, one of Anafenza. Why not? I mean, these are cards that give it more of a toolbox type feel. Jamoka's Command, Abrupt Decays, Fatal Push seems to be enough control on the side that we can bring in versus like particular creatures that we have to kill. But again, if the board state gets clogged, like Zoo, even Burn, this deck can outpace, clog up the board a lot better, and then just give us time, and we are going to become snowballed out of control very, very quickly. Turn 4s are very consistent with this deck. With Hardened Scales and Winding Constrictor, all of the cards just become out of control. Rishkar, again, still is insanely good in this deck. And so far, so good. I mean, the win percentage is quite high. I'll have to show you. I have all my games on my laptop because I've been playing at the store. But I can show you kind of the win percentage with the deck. And it's done. I mean, I've played pretty much everything in the format. You name it, I've played it. But the decks that I think that this does very well against is like the Grixis, the Sultai, Abzan, Jund, those type of Zoo, those type of decks that are trying to interact with you. A lot of these cards like the Hangerback Walker and Walking Ballista just get too much value. I'd even put Nissa and Spike Feeder in that list, and now Trinket Mage. There's just too many cards that get more value than what my opponent's trying to do. One of the games, for example, I Walking Ballista for 2. I had Hardened Scales out, and my opponent had a Young Pyromancer and a Delver that hadn't flipped yet, and was able to shoot down both of them. And I mean, I think it was his turn 2 and my turn 2 as well. And so I basically traded Walking Ballista for 2 of his finishers, Young Pyromancer and Delver. And it was pretty hard for my opponent to come back for that point. I think my opponent felt pretty safe going turn 1 Delver, turn 2 it didn't flip, and then turn 2 Young Pyromancer. There's another, and then the next game I was able to take care of a Snapcaster Mage and a Young Pyromancer with a Walking Ballista and still keep it alive. I think it was in response to him actually trying to bolt it and just killing those 2 off and just getting so much value. So this is my go-to deck for Modern right now. I know I've been very critical about Modern, and people are calling me a hypocrite right now. I'll play the format when I feel like it. I still don't like it. Eggs is still one of the games that I played, that Infinite Life game. Game 1 was ridiculous as he tried to go off on turn 3 with Eggs. And just eggs you never want to concede. That's one of the reasons why they banned the Second Sunrise. Is like, I remember, did Conley Woods fall asleep during one of the matchups? And I believe another person asked the judge if he can go take a bathroom break and watch his opponent to see if he actually assembles what he needs to assemble. Just because how long it takes eggs to do what it does. And it was the same thing. I think I played 1 minute and 25 seconds, game number 1, and watched my opponent try to go off for 15 minutes, and then he missed and then just scooped. Because he missed. He just used all his resources, I believe like 3 of the face rewards, and just ended up missing. And so you don't want to scoop to eggs. Yes, that is a low probability, but that's still a probability. And so for 15 minutes, I sat and did nothing. And so those type of reasons, I still hate Ad Nauseam. I still hate decks like Agoro's Vengeance and just these high variance combo based decks. I don't like in the format. And to each his own. Some people like those. That's why they play Modern. I don't. I tend to go like games that last longer, have more interaction, and have the ability to kind of outplay, outpace, out-strategize your opponent. So, but this is a fun deck. This deck is insanely fun. What I really like about this is if you invest in kind of this Winding Constrictor Rishkar shell, you have the main pieces for a Standard, Frontier, and Modern deck right here. A lot of these decks are also, like, a lot of these cards are legal in Frontier. The Court of Callings, Hangerback Walker, Walking Ballista package is legal in Frontier. You have Nissa, Rishkar, Winding Constrictor, have the Hardened Scales, and the Elvis Mystic can replace the Birds of Paradise in a deck like that. But I mean, I have a Frontier deck tech with the Winding Constrictor. Of course, it doesn't have like infinite combo with the Rite of Passage. I mean, the further back in the sets you go, the more powerful this deck becomes. But I mean, it's once you get this shell, you're on your way to having a deck in all formats. So I'm going to probably do a kind of a deck tech or a primer for how to do that. What cards to invest in if you want three different decks viable, or 3 different formats viable with kind of one deck. So any suggestions in the comment section? I'm pretty sure I might be missing something for this deck, but it works wonders. This card is a lot better than if you go back to my spoiler video, I was calling this like a kind of bad Perilous Mirror, and boy was I wrong. This card has so much synergies with the Winding Constrictor and Hardened Scales. The 4 mana with the Walking Ballista and Hardened Scales out, does not feel dead whatsoever. You're getting 2 counters on your Ballista. And in Modern, where a format where you just need to shoot down specific cards, like Birds against Abda and Company, this is insanely powerful card. So I'll try to play some more matchups. I'm waiting for the Gathering Magic video to come out. I don't want to kind of, I mean, I'm getting paid to do videos for them. I don't want to kind of rain on their parade. I know I was late on the video series, so it was my bad that it wasn't on time. It wasn't on the regular scheduled time. So I don't know if they're pushing it back to the regular scheduled time or not. But as soon as that's live, as soon as we actually get to see the videos for the old school version of this deck, I'm going to start really playing with this one. Anyway, this has been Kevin with RogueDeckBuilder.com. Thanks for watching.